Welcome to another episode of the 1.2 podcast. How you doing, Jack?
The listeners demanded that we come back.
I think you meant listener, right?
Right. Well, I've listened to it, and I assume you've listened to it, so I think we
That's
can use
true.
listeners.
That's true. That's true. And we were quite adamant.
Yes.
So what's new in the world, Jack?
Well, we have a new world leader.
Oh, world leader, huh?
World leader.
And how do you define world leader?
Well, for those of us that believe in God.
Let's be more specific, Jack.
I'm trying to say something that's not offensive. I'm just kidding. We have a new pope. How about that?
There we go. There we go. And for all of our listeners out there, I'd like to remind everybody that one of us is Catholic and the other is not. So if you have strong feelings about this subject and you may or may not be easily offended by discussions on this topic, which may not align with your views on the topic, we may express views during this podcast which may not align with your views.
Where do you think this conversation is going?
I have no idea. And that's why you put the warning at the beginning, right?
There you go. You ask for permission, not forgiveness. What is
No, I just tell people don't listen to us if you don't like
don't
us.
listen to us. Yeah. Well, that's they're not going to need that warning.
Yeah,
They
no,
just
well,
don't listen
that's
to
true.
us to
That's
start
true.
with. So
Well, you never know. You never know. But that being said, you're correct. This is a huge event. How long was the last pope?
I believe 12 years. I think it was
12 years.
2013. But
Okay.
I want to thank you as the non-Catholic for supporting my pope and my Catholicism with your background. Perfect background for this conversation. First American pope.
The first American
I suppose.
pope.
I suppose I have to get a little bit more specific. The first pope from the United States of America.
Ah, right.
Because we
right.
did have a
Latin America. There are
yes,
other
South American.
Americas. We can't be so ethnocentrist that we believe that we're the only America.
What about the first American pope? Like,
First
because this is America.
America. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we could claim that one. I'm pretty sure Latin America would not object to us taking that.
Good. But it's exciting. It's exciting for us Catholics.
Tell me about the relevance of a pope from America.
Well, the relevance is that it's never happened before.
Okay.
This is the 267th successor to St. Peter, and there has never been an American pope. And many have believed that there never will be, or never,
So
there never has been, and never will be.
Process behind that? Why didn't
thought process is that the United States is a global superpower, and giving it the papacy would give it even more power and delegitimize, kind of the role that the Pope plays in the world politics.
Okay.
So
is there any risk that Trump unilaterally moves the Vatican to the United States?
I think there's always a risk with anything related to Trump. I'm waiting for now we're going to go off on a tangent. I thought we were just going to have a nice conversation about the Pope, but you went there, so I'll go there too. I'm waiting for the conspiracy theorists, because you'll remember that, of course, J.D. Vance visited with
That's right.
Pope Francis, I believe, a day before he died, at least shortly before he died.
Right.
And so Pope Francis dies after visiting with the American vice president. And then within a couple of weeks, we have the first American pope.
And Vance was he's a relatively new convert to Catholicism, isn't he?
Yes.
So, maybe a sleeper cell type thing going on. Okay.
You're using words that are going to get this flagged.
There we go. Well, it's also going to get listeners, so, we'll be on a list somewhere, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Oh, is it someone who once said, I post something outrageous and 10 people leave because of what I said and 10 people join because of what I said?
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe we can get a listener or two out of this.
There you go.
So the world is, the United States is too much of a superpower. So you never thought there'd be a Catholic Pope. So now that there is a Catholic Pope and you are a Catholic follower, you just call yourselves Catholics, right?
Yeah, and I don't really know, what does Catholic Pope mean? I mean, like, isn't
Well,
the Pope
it's big.
Catholic?
It's big C Catholic.
Okay,
Oh, I mean that's the joke, right? Is the Pope Catholic?
great.
Um, it's big C Catholic Pope,
Okay, okay,
right?
yeah.
There was a Greek Orthodox Pope. There might still be a Greek Orthodox Pope. I'd have to look that up. But I know when there was the split, at one point there were two popes, so they had to differentiate Catholic Pope versus Orthodox Pope. But that's neither here nor there. Um, so as a follower of the Catholic Pope,
Hmm.
um, I mean, what does this do for you? On a broader scale, and maybe even on a like a day to day basis.
On a day-to-day basis, probably nothing. Um, it doesn't change really anything practically about how I practice my faith. Um, on a broader basis, I think I don't know, it's just exciting. I wasn't expecting to be as invested and as involved in the whole, College of Cardinals process and how they
Hmm.
go about electing a new pope. And because it seemed so far off and so distant and so unrelatable,
Right,
that
right,
someone from this country could even have an opportunity. Uh,
right.
and I think it's most striking when you listen to uh, the Pope's two brothers talk in interviews
Mm,
about
right.
like the process they went through. They're I think the common theme, they're like, yeah, we talk every day. We play words with friends together. We
With
play
the
the
with the Pope.
Wordle. Yeah, like, and we joked leading into the conclave, and one of the brothers, like, I've heard your name being tossed around, and he's like, yeah, that's a joke. Like, I'm not. This is coming from now the
Yeah,
Pope.
right,
Like,
right,
yeah, that people say stuff, but that'll never
right,
happen. And
right,
then
right.
there's no communication, nothing whatsoever. They're watching like the rest of the world is watching. The white smoke comes out, the bells ring, they start reading off the name, and they go Roberto Francis, and
Right.
this guy's basically like, holy crap, that's my brother. Like, something you never
Wow.
would have expected. And then
Wow.
you're finding out at the same time, like,
Yeah,
can you
right.
imagine, like, nothing in our world relates to that. No
Right.
appointment to some, you
Right.
know higher
Right.
up, the president of the United States. Like,
Right.
yes, they're getting elected at the same time, but you've got numbers behind the scene, like,
Yeah.
before the
Right.
general public
Right.
knows.
Right.
And to be the brother of
Right.
this person, and it just, it strikes me as, I'm not even answering your question. I'm just going into my fascination about the
Well,
process. But you're elevated from just this already high role in the Catholic Church as a cardinal.
sure.
But even that, like, there are
Yeah.
133 of
Right.
them,
Right.
or I think there's more than that. I think there are 133 voting ones.
Right.
But you're just this ordinary man. I mean, you're more than an ordinary man, but
Right.
and then you just get elevated into this life changing role.
Right.
I
Like
mean,
a
you change your
universally
name.
known. Yeah. Right. Right. That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. This is the first time, and so there's another part of this too. Is he's kind of younger, right, than people maybe
Yep.
project. He's 67 years old, and
I think
some
he's
people
69, but
69. Okay,
yep.
and a lot of people were thinking, someone in their mid 70s.
Hmm.
Then now there is a cutoff, right? You had to be younger than 80
To be eligible, yes.
to be eligible to be pope. You had to be under 80, but a lot of people were guessing. And the logic behind that, I suppose, was that you don't want the same person for too long in
Right.
case they're
Effectively operates
radical.
as a term limit.
Right, right. Um, so it's interesting that we even have, this is the first time I remember seeing interviews with, the Pope's brother or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's just a dude. like
Yeah.
just a dude wearing shorts and a t-shirt or whatever. Like, yeah, we were growing up and we always kidded with him like, oh, you're gonna be Pope one day because he was the Holy One and he was always
Hmm.
so, and just to see a regular guy joking
Yeah.
about his brother being Pope, there's something about that that really does I don't know, humanizes him. That's not
Yeah.
the, it's not like I thought prior popes weren't human, but brings it into a sphere that we can understand, I think.
And I think that's what I'm getting at with,
Yeah.
to your question, the broader, implications is it feels like a much more relatable person now. Like
Right.
I
Right.
I know you always joke and criticize the Catholic Church for elevating people, right? But I think it to a certain extent it's a fair criticism that we
Hmm.
put people up there that
Right.
are I would argue that they're not actually elevated, but they look like
Right.
that,
Right.
and we
The
pray to
robes,
them,
the robes and the stuff don't help if
right?
you're making an argument against elevation. But yes,
Right.
I
But
take your point.
but and I agree that like the Pope has always seemed like this world high leader that is not relatable and I don't have access
Right.
to,
Right.
and I think if I would actually have met them, especially Pope Francis, seems like he wanted
Right.
nothing to do with that. But yeah, you're watching these interviews and the one guy's like, yeah, I was reading a book upstairs and my niece texted me and said there was white smoke. So I went and I turned on the TV to see who the new Pope would be. And then it's my brother.
There's my brother.
Yeah.
There's my brother. Right.
Mhm.
Right. I do wonder. So, we're getting more and more into the age where there's more records and recordings of everything. Like, it's got to be hard and harder now to, when's the next time we're going to get a pope and then like a YouTube video from 30 years ago comes out of him like chugging beer
Yeah.
or drunk at a wedding or something like that. It's going to be interesting to see, like as things, and I'm not saying it's like a good thing or a bad thing. It's just like that's the world we live in,
Hmm.
right? Because these people, are human, and even though we think of them in a different light once they become pope, obviously they had a life, right? And
Right.
they grew up and all those things. So there's just more evidence of our prior misdeeds and
Yeah.
things like
I
that.
think it's funny that not that this was bad in any way, but
Right.
I was watching a video and it was from game one of the 2005 World Series,
Hmm.
which is the White Sox versus the Astros.
Okay.
And it was just I don't know how someone dug this out or found it, but it's like a 10-second clip, and it's in the ninth inning, and it's Bobby Jenks, the closer, just throwing a strike to one of the Astros hitter, and it just pans to the crowd and just focuses in on one guy who's just kind of like standing there nervously watching the World
Hmm.
Series, and it's the Pope. Like, and he's not in a collar. It's not. He's just wearing a White Sox jersey, and
Really?
yeah, and
Really?
it's just.
Wow.
I just find that stuff fascinating. Like
Right. Right.
this guy's just at the White Sox World Series game,
Wow.
and
Wow.
I think you hear like to that point too a common theme among like all of the American news channels were covering the
Hmm.
election, right? And
Right.
so they all had their respective experts on
Right.
the
Right.
process, who's a priest,
Right.
and they're all just kind of speechless when they announce who the Pope. I just sent him an email like 4 days ago.
Right.
Like we were just
Right.
talking, and, and like they even them who are high-ranking,
Right.
Catholic officials
Right.
have never felt a closer connection
Right.
to the
Right.
papacy, and it's I don't know, it's kind of incredible.
That's so, and I am curious. I'm going to do a quick search right now. So, um, it does say that the Catholic Church is growing, which is interesting. The U.S. Catholic population has increased by 3 to 6% each decade since 1965. So I want, I'm kind of wondering, what is the purpose of a Catholic, of a pope from the United States and things like that, and it's interesting, just demographics and things. Um, So, without getting into theology, as a general question from a non-Catholic to a Catholic, what happens if you disagree with the Pope?
Well, look at the last few years. I think there's been a lot of disagreement with the Pope.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I don't know. As it's, I'm wondering how to answer it from a personal level or kind of a broader church level. Um,
because
I don't.
because I know that from a church level, even certain priests disagree with certain um,
Mhm.
teachings or statements from the Pope and things like that. I guess I mean my first question. Obviously, it's allowed, right?
Yes.
Do they ever talk about it?
Yeah. I think it's. I think there are so many core tenets
Mm-hmm.
of our faith
Mm-hmm.
that are just they have to be assumed, and so there's no disagreements on a fundamental level. I think
Sure.
when it plays out, it can tend to be play out a little differently. Um, but I think everything can be justified by relating back to kind of those core tenets that it's hard for there to be conflict there.
Okay.
So I don't think any of the disagreements are like about those fundamental aspects. It's just how it plays out in practice.
Sure.
So I think of immigration, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's recently kind of a little bit of a hot button issue. I think the what it goes back to at a fundamental Catholic level is just everybody deserves to be treated with humanity and dignity
Right. Dignity,
and
respect.
respect,
Yeah.
right? So I don't think there's any disagreement about that. I don't think even the hardcore deporter is saying that these people should be set aside like trash. Maybe they
Right.
are,
Right.
but I don't
Right.
think the disagreement is that so much as someone who would oppose it would say, well, yes, I believe they should be treated with dignity and respect, but they also need to respect the legal process of accomplishing that.
Right.
So, where the disagreement might be, should these people be deported or not?
Right.
There's no disagreement about treating them with respect. I don't
Okay.
know if that makes sense at
Yeah.
all,
No.
but
Yeah. No. Certainly does. Something I didn't know, um, because I was under the impression that anything the Pope said was like infallible to Catholics and things like that. But most recently, and hopefully this will enlighten our listeners a little bit. I learned that the Pope is only infallible when he speaks ex cathedra, which is very rare. And I
mhm.
guess the last most recent instances were like in 1854 and 1950. So it's not like something that every time he gives a mass or says something off the cuff like that's infallible.
Mhm.
That to me actually, I mean I'm still not Catholic, but that justifies the kind of the position a little more in my mind.
That's what I'm kind of getting at is that they're
Right,
like, you don't, it's not as if you are the executive branch and the legislative branch and the judiciary once you become pope.
right,
Like, we have our own separation of powers, and we have our teachings, and we have our guidelines, if you will.
right,
And I don't think, I mean, the disagreements, yes, there are disagreements on, more of the political type issues, but it's not as if they're changing
right,
or trying to change what our faith says or what we should believe.
right,
It's just how does that play out practically in the
right.
world?
So in a sense, is it similar to if you were going to, mass and the priest himself said something that you personally disagree with? It's just kind of on higher level of the church,
Yeah,
political body itself.
right. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think, I've had this discussion offline before. I think, what would it take? I think you've posed the question like
Right, right.
to, disavow the
Right,
Pope or your religion. And I struggle to come up with an example. And I think it's one of those things that we talked about in our first ever podcast with
right,
what's a generational talent. I think it's you'll know it when you see it type of thing.
right,
It's when you
right.
do, um, I don't remember the word you used, but ex whatever.
Oh, ex cathedra? Yeah.
Yeah, when you speak like that,
Right, right,
it will be abundantly clear.
right, right. Well, good. I think that's no, I mean, I think this whole, if nothing else, again, I'm not a Catholic, but I think this was a very important thing for our country, and the world. I can't be so ethnocentrist to think this only affects the United States. Um, but the Catholic Church is a huge body, and I think like any denomination, it has its rights and its wrongs, and its legitimate followers and its illegitimate followers. So I'm not sitting here today and saying that any other church is greater or worse, and you know uh, all that. But it does affect our country. It does affect the non-Catholics because the Pope does have such influence on the general mentality of so many people.
Mhm.
So things like this, I think, are important for anyone, even if we don't follow the Catholic traditions and church, just to understand and to have an appreciation for what this means to so many people.
Yeah, and I'm curious, and I appreciate that perspective, and I'm curious to see what the global kind of reaction is after we get past the fact that we've elected a new pope. I mean, that's
Right,
exciting in its own right, but
right,
this whole idea of an American pope, because you know most even Americans acknowledge he's actually like the least American that we could
right.
have elected.
Sure,
He was in
sure.
Peru for 12 years,
Right,
and so he's almost the perfect candidate if you want to, you know, here
right, right. Get a
we'll give
dash of
you
this and then,
we'll
yeah.
give you an American, but he's not really. I mean, he's a missionary. He's not.
Right, right.
He's not a parish priest.
Okay.
He's been a missionary for his whole career.
Yeah.
So he has that, I think, more common relation to, I think, more globally.
Hmm.
That's what Catholics are,
Right,
versus in America here. I think we tend to
right.
be more parish focused here.
Yep.
Um, so it's like the College of Cardinals appeasing everyone
Yeah.
almost.
Right,
And I
right.
don't know if there will be the criticisms that we expected with an American Pope,
Hmm.
because it's hard to even say he's
Right,
that. I mean, he's born
right.
in Chicago. That's pretty much all he's got here.
Well, I mean,
Of
there's
course,
there's
that's a broad
that's,
overgeneralization, but
I mean, you grow up in a place, and that place never leaves you.
right.
So there's going to be some some moments that will be, I'm sure, just what, this seems to be a product of his growing up in Chicago. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just, he went to college at Villanova, right? So it's
Yeah, he's
again,
hardened.
yeah,
He's
that's
from
right.
Chicago, went to Philly for.
That's right. That's right. So it is fascinating to see if he'll kind of come out intentionally moderate. I almost see him like a John Roberts,
Yeah,
of the Supreme Court. Like he's very aware of the perceptions and very aware of,
I think that's a very good analogy, and I expect that's how
yeah, yeah,
he'll
especially at
be.
first.
Hmm.
Especially at first. But it is interesting, again, we talked about age. I mean, he's 67, and life expectancies are pretty, and he looks kind of fit. He
Hmm.
doesn't look, But with the he could be Pope for 20
Yeah.
25 years. So very interesting, very interesting, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes long term. So I'm excited for you, Jack.
Thank you.
You reconnected with your faith in your church.
I don't say reconnected, but it was definitely a deeper exploration than I've ever taken. So.
Well, good, good. I think it's important for everyone to examine what they believe, why they believe
I'll
it.
close with my favorite part too about him being from Chicago. Of course, you've seen all the memes and
Yeah, yeah.
he's got Chicago produced its a Pope before a 4,000 yard passer, those sorts of things. But I know you don't know what Malort is. I think you probably know
No,
what
I
it is
don't.
now after we talked about it. But
Right, right.
it's you can look it up and see exactly
I'll
what
have
it
to
is.
look that
But
up.
one of the sayings going around now is, you say like, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We say that a lot as Catholics.
Yep.
It's my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Well, for what it's worth, Malort Pope was like the fourth Google search when I
Yeah.
typed in
I mean,
Malort, even though I misspelled it. So interesting. I'll have to try a taste sometime.
don't do it. Don't
Okay,
do it.
fine. All right. Well, to all you Catholics out there, congratulations. And to all you non-Catholics out there, I have a good day.